A 73-year-old man sat alone one night, repeating an action he had done thousands of times before. It seemed harmless, even comforting. But that night, something changed forever. He not only lost control of his body, he lost a part of himself that he would never get back. And here's the shocking part. It wasn't because he was masturbating, but how he was doing it and what he didn't realize. Yes, masturbation in old age can quietly harm exactly those areas of health that one tries to protect, unless certain truths I'm about to reveal are understood. James, a men's health expert with over 30 years of experience helping older men through the most delicate chapters of their lives, has seen this firsthand. He has treated thousands of men over 60 and knows exactly what happens when they stay in the dark about their sexual health. And he's not just speaking as a doctor, but as a man who has witnessed his generation suffer silently, anxiously wondering, is this still normal? Am I doing something wrong? The reality is that most older men masturbate the same way they did at 20. But the body, the brain, and the heart don't work the same way after 60. What once felt like relief can now become a slow drain on energy, vitality, and even self-confidence. So why does almost no one talk about this? Why do so many men keep habits for decades without realizing they're paying a silent price? In this video, I'm going to share 5 secrets about masturbation that every older man deserves to know. Truths that can protect the prostate, improve circulation, and help maintain an active, safe, and satisfying sex life after 70 and beyond. These aren't warnings meant to scare you, but lessons to help you take back control. Because knowledge is power, and it's never too late to reclaim it. Stay with me until the end, because the last secret could make all the difference. How long will you be able to stay healthy, independent, and sexually active? These are things you rarely hear from a doctor, but once you know them, you'll wish you'd learned them sooner. So let's get started. Before we dive into these 5 powerful secrets, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any honest, science-based discussions about your health, intimacy, and independence after 60. And if you think this topic matters, type a 1 in the comments to show you're with me. If not, type a 0. Your feedback helps me create content that truly matters to you. Now that we've broken the silence and set the stage, let's explore 5 secrets about masturbation that many older men wish they had known sooner. These truths could have protected their confidence, preserved their health, and changed how they age. The first secret: your erection isn't everything, and that's perfectly okay. There comes a time in every older man's life when he realizes his body doesn't respond the way it used to. Blood flow slows, sensations shift, and what was once easy now requires patience, focus, and can sometimes cause frustration. For many, this moment brings an uncomfortable silence and a quiet panic, a small voice whispering, "Something is wrong with me." But here's the truth no one told us. Your erection isn't everything, and that doesn't mean you're broken or less of a man. The culture we grew up in taught us to evaluate sexual success by performance. Firmness meant health, duration meant strength, and if you didn't measure up, something was wrong. But those ideas were planted in our youth, shaped by movies, magazines, and a distorted view of masculinity. As we age, no one updates the manual for us. No one takes us aside to say, hey, your body is changing, but that doesn't mean you're any less of a man. I've had patients, men in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s, sit across from me with tears in their eyes, convinced that their inability to get a full erection means they've lost their masculinity. What they don't realize is that their body is simply entering a new phase where the focus shifts from firmness to connection, from performance to presence. They still crave intimacy, still long for closeness, but feel lost because no one has explained that orgasm and erection are not the same. Yes, you read that right. You can still experience deep and satisfying release without a full erection. Orgasm functions through a different system. However, most older men don't realize this. They've never been told about the changes that come with aging. They are left to interpret these changes as failure instead of evolution. Why is this such a well-kept secret? Because our society doesn't talk about male sexuality as men age. We focus on pills and quick fixes, but not on understanding. Doctors don't address it, families don't ask, and most men feel too embarrassed to talk about it openly, even with friends. The result is generations of older men struggling in silence with guilt, confusion, and shame over something completely natural. Let me tell you about Charles, a 72-year-old man I recently worked with. He came to my office frustrated, embarrassed, and ready to give up his sex life altogether. He said, "Doctor, it's like the lights are on, but no one's home." We talked and dismantled decades of unspoken beliefs. I explained that pleasure doesn't disappear. It changes, and with patience and self-compassion, he could still find sexual satisfaction, just in a different way. 2 months later, Charles told me he was feeling something he hadn't in years: hope. That's why this first secret is so important. When you stop pressuring yourself to perform and start exploring what truly brings you pleasure, a whole new world opens up. Touch becomes intentional. Time becomes your ally, not your enemy. And intimacy, whether with yourself or your partner, regains its meaning. It's no longer measured by firmness, but by presence. Older men need to hear this truth, not just from doctors, but from each other. You are not broken, you are adapting, and that change is not a death sentence. It's an invitation to rediscover your body in ways you never had time for before. But why don't more men know this? Why aren't we taught that our sexual identity goes far beyond anatomy? Because we live in a culture that glorifies youth and makes aging invisible, especially when it comes to male sexuality. However, that silence is costing us more than we realize. It's time to break it, for ourselves and for the generations to come. So if right now you feel like something isn't working for you, I want you to know this: you're not alone, and it's not too late. Your journey doesn't end with age, it begins anew with understanding. Erections may have taken a back seat, but what's possible when you let go of that expectation can be even more powerful. And speaking of powerful, what if I told you that masturbation after 60 isn't just about sex? It's connected to your emotions, your stress, and your mental health. In the next part, I will share a truth that most men never hear. It's the emotional and hidden reason why so many older men turn to self-pleasure, and why ignoring it might be draining your energy little by little, day by day. Stay with me, because this is going to surprise you. The second secret: masturbation isn't just sexual, it's emotional and neurological. Most men think of masturbation simply as a way to relieve tension, a moment of physical pleasure, a private and instinctual act with no deeper meaning. But after working with older men for over 30 years, I've come to understand something much more complex, and honestly, much more important. Masturbation, especially in your 60s, 70s and beyond, isn't just sexual. It's emotional, neurological, and psychological. And the reason older men don't know this is simple. No one ever told us. No one thought we would still be interested in pleasure, let alone still need it to feel whole. I remember one of my patients, Howard, a retired veteran, almost 70 years old. He didn't come to see me for physical issues, but because he felt emotionally empty, numb, disconnected, as if he were merely surviving without truly living. As we talked, it became clear that masturbation had become something he no longer did for pleasure, but for peace. It helped him sleep, soothed his nerves after stressful days. It was, in his own words, his reset button. However, he had never made that connection. He thought he was simply holding on to a habit from his youth, not realizing that this private act was fulfilling a far deeper purpose: emotional regulation. And Howard is not alone. Scientific research shows that many men over 60 use masturbation as a way to manage stress, loneliness, pain, and even fear. And it's not just about desire, it's about finding balance. It's about regaining a sense of control when everything around you feels uncertain. But this is where it gets complicated. Most of us were never taught to observe our emotions, let alone to understand how they connect to our sexual habits. We are men. We were raised to be strong, to endure, to suppress everything. So when we find ourselves touching ourselves, not out of desire, but out of sadness or discomfort, we don't understand what's really happening. And without that understanding, we risk turning something that could be healing into something empty or even harmful. That's why this secret is so important. Masturbation in old age often becomes a coping mechanism, and when used mindfully, it can be healthy and even therapeutic. But when it turns into an unconscious act, it can start to drain you, not because the act itself is bad, but because you are no longer present while doing it. You're numbing yourself instead of connecting, and little by little in silence, that can steal your joy and vitality. It's also important to talk about the brain and chemistry. After orgasm, your brain releases powerful neurochemicals like oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin. All of these affect mood, sleep, motivation, and even memory. This release can be a blessing for older men struggling with depression or insomnia. But again, this only works if you are aware of what you are doing and why you are doing it. Many times, older men get caught in autopilot, the same routine, the same thoughts, the same moment, and the brain begins to shut down. It stops responding with the same energy because it's no longer being stimulated in new or meaningful ways. That's why changing your mindset is so important. Don't think of masturbation as just a habit. Think of it as an act of awareness. Ask yourself, am I doing this to connect with myself or to avoid feeling something I don't want to face? Am I consciously choosing this moment, or am I just filling a void? The truth is, no one ever taught us this kind of introspection because men's emotional lives have long been overlooked, especially as we get older. People assume we stop feeling, that we become numb like stones, indifferent and detached, but that's never been true. In fact, we actually feel more now than we did when we were younger. We've just become experts at hiding it. Sometimes, the only place where those feelings slip out is when we're completely alone. So let this be a call to bring that awareness into the light, to honor the emotional and neurological sides of your sexuality, and to stop pretending that touch is just touch, because it's not. It's memory, it's emotion, it's survival, and when used wisely, it can also be healing. Now comes the part most men never notice, especially those who have been sexually inactive for a long time. While masturbation can soothe the soul, it can also protect the body. In the next section, I'll share a secret that may save your sexual health in the years to come. The unspoken truth about the famous "use it or lose it" rule, and what really happens inside a man's body when he stops being sexually active after 60. You won't want to miss what's coming. Third secret, the "use it or lose it" rule is real, but it's misunderstood. There's a hard truth that most older men don't hear until it's too late. When it comes to your sexual function, if you stop using it, you really can lose it. But what almost nobody explains is how this happens, or how deeply it can affect not just your sex life, but your entire sense of identity. This isn't about instilling fear, it's about understanding the silence, the changes that happen inside your body over time, and why so many good men wonder why nothing seems to work anymore. The answer has been there all along, quietly hidden for years. As men age, blood vessels naturally narrow, nerve endings become less sensitive, and the erectile tissues begin to lose elasticity. These aren't random occurrences. They are biological responses to one thing: inactivity. Just as a muscle wastes away when not used, your sexual system also starts to shut down if it isn't kept active. And this is the part that pains me the most. Most older men have no idea this is happening until it's already their reality. I've seen it over and over in my practice. A man in his late 50s or 60s finds a new partner after years of being alone. Maybe he was widowed, perhaps he went through a divorce, or he may have stepped away from intimacy for a while. Now, when he finally feels desire again, he discovers that his body isn't cooperating. It's not just that things are a bit slower. It feels different, numb, unresponsive, sometimes even painful. And the worst part is that he starts to think something is wrong with him when, in reality, it's a perfectly natural and predictable result of long-term disuse. Why aren't men told about this earlier? Why is this basic truth left out of nearly all conversations about aging? Because sexual health after 60 is still treated as optional, as if pleasure, function, and intimacy stop mattering once gray hairs appear. It's a cruel myth that robs thousands of older men of the chance to maintain something that could have stayed vibrant with just a little attention over time. Let me tell you about Roy. He was 74 when he came to see me. He hadn't been intimate with anyone for over a decade, not because he didn't want to, but because life had worn him down. His wife had passed away, he had grown used to loneliness, and gradually he even stopped touching himself. When he met someone new, he felt very happy, but he was also bewildered when his body didn't respond. He tried pills, creams, devices. Nothing worked the way he expected. I gently explained to him that what he was experiencing wasn't dysfunction, it was disuse. The internal structure of his penis had been slowly wasting away. The blood vessels had narrowed and the nerve signals had dulled. No one had warned him that this could happen. But here comes the hopeful part. With time, gentle stimulation, and consistent activity, even if it's just with himself, he began to notice a change. It wasn't a miracle. It didn't happen overnight, but it was real. His body was remembering little by little. His confidence returned, and with it, that feeling of being alive in ways he thought were long lost. That's why masturbation, especially in later years, isn't just about pleasure. It's about maintenance. It keeps blood flowing to delicate tissues. It's a signal to your body. This still matters, and the body listens. You aren't just keeping a function alive. You're staying alive in deeply personal and emotionally significant ways. Many men think that if they're not in a relationship, it's not worth taking care of their sexual health, but that's the biggest misconception of all. You don't need a partner to maintain your sexual vibrancy. All you need is presence, curiosity, and consistency. And the beautiful truth is that this attention daily or weekly can allow you someday to return to intimacy with another person, being fully present and capable, because you never let that part of you die. Don't wait for a future partner to rediscover your body. Keep that relationship with yourself strong, because the moment you abandon it, the body starts to forget. And the longer it forgets, the harder it becomes to remember. And there's another hidden danger I've seen time and again, one that men rarely recognize until it has already weakened their drive, their energy, and even their desire for real intimacy. In the next part, we'll talk about something most men turn to, especially when they feel lonely, but which could be quietly reprogramming their brains in the worst way possible. The next secret could be costing you the most without you even realizing it. Stay with me. Fourth secret, pornography might be destroying your sexual reflexes without you knowing it. When you're alone, especially as an older man, it's easy to develop habits that feel comforting. Late at night, the house is quiet. You reach for the familiar, your phone, your tablet, maybe your laptop. A few taps and you're watching a scene that promises quick satisfaction. You don't even think about it. It happens automatically and works in the moment. But over time, something strange starts to happen. You notice that your excitement fades faster and the climax feels more monotonous. Your genuine interest in intimacy begins to diminish. You don't feel broken, but something feels off. This is the hidden cost of a habit that's gone unchecked for too long. Pornography in later years may be quietly eroding your natural sexual responses, and most men have absolutely no idea this is happening. It's not about shame, it's about science. I've seen this again and again, men in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s, puzzled by their lack of response to touch as they once had, wondering why their interest in real women and genuine moments has faded. They blame it on age, hormones, or stress, but often the real culprit is the stimulation caused by decades of pornography use. And unlike what we experienced in our youth, the consequences now are much deeper. You see, your brain has what we call the reward system. It's the part that tells you what to desire, what to seek, what feels pleasurable. When you consume high-intensity pornography, especially alone, your brain floods with dopamine, the pleasure chemical. At first it feels amazing, but like any drug, your brain starts to adapt. It needs more visual stimulation, more novelty, more impact. What once excited you now barely registers. Your threshold rises, and when that happens, your connection to real human intimacy weakens. What makes this so dangerous for older men is that our brains aren't as flexible as they used to be. Plasticity, the ability to recover and form new healthy patterns, declines with age. So if you've relied on pornography as your main source of sexual stimulation for years, the connections in your brain become rigid and over time stop responding to natural signals like memory, imagination, or even loving physical touch. This is what I call arousal fatigue, and it's incredibly common among older men. The worst part is that most aren't even aware of it. They assume they're losing sexual desire because of age medication or stress. They don't realize it's because their brains have been trained to respond only to intense, artificial images, and now they don't react to what's real. I remember a patient named Ernest, a 68-year-old widower and retiree. He started watching pornography every night just to feel some sense of connection with someone, anyone. At first, it brought him relief, but after a year, he realized he could no longer feel anything for another person, not even emotionally. It was as if he had built a wall around his senses. He felt numb, disconnected, and deeply frustrated. We worked together to help him slowly detox from that dependency. It wasn't easy, but after a few months, he began to reconnect with his own body, not through videos, but through breathing, touch, and memory. His senses came alive again. He stopped feeling like a man trapped in the past and started living anew, fully present in the moment. And this is the truth that breaks my heart. Most older men simply don't know this is happening. No one warns them. No one talks about how pornography affects an aging brain. Instead, they quietly lose connection with their natural pleasure and assume it's just part of getting older. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can retrain your mind. You can reset your response system. It starts by stepping away from the screen, even if it's just for a while. Allow your brain to rediscover the simple, powerful sensations of your own body. Breathe, slow down, and touch with presence instead of just seeking performance. You'll be surprised by what you can still feel, what still lives inside you, waiting to awaken. And when you break that cycle, something beautiful happens. Your imagination returns, your sensitivity deepens, and your desire for real connection, whether with yourself or another person, begins to grow again. It's not about giving up sexuality. It's about reclaiming it from something that silently robs you. But there is one final truth you need to hear, the one that ties it all together, because masturbation, when practiced mindfully, is not something to hide from or be ashamed of. In fact, it may be exactly what supports your health, your mood, and even your longevity. In the next and final secret, I will show you why this often misunderstood act could be your most powerful ally for aging well. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Fifth secret. Most doctors don't talk about this, but masturbation can actually be a lifesaver. Throughout all my years working with men over 60, there's something I hear that breaks my heart every time. I didn't know it was still okay to do this at my age. They say it quietly, often looking down with a hint of shame in their voice, as if they've been caught doing something wrong, inappropriate, or even dangerous. But the truth is quite the opposite. Masturbation, especially in older men, isn't just acceptable. It's often one of the healthiest things you can do for yourself. Not just for sexual pleasure, but for your emotional balance, your physical health, and even your dignity. The sad part is, older men rarely hear this message. And the reason most doctors don't bring it up is, why? Because we've been trained to focus on what's wrong, not on what keeps you whole. We are taught to discuss medications, symptoms, surgeries, but not pleasure, connection, or identity. And certainly not the quiet, private habits that help keep a man grounded. That kind of conversation is missing from most doctors' offices. As a result, millions of men are left wondering in silence if the things they still do, or wish they could, are somehow shameful or dangerous. Masturbation promotes blood flow in the pelvic region, which helps maintain tissue health. It supports prostate function by allowing the body to release accumulated fluids. It improves sleep by releasing and calming neurochemicals like oxytocin and serotonin. It even lifts mood and helps fight loneliness, a quiet burden many older adults struggle with every day. But it's more than just biology. It's also about identity. When a man loses touch with his sexuality, especially in later years, he often loses touch with a deep part of himself. He starts to feel invisible, not just to others, but to himself as well. Stop seeing yourself as someone who no longer deserves pleasure, who no longer has desire, who no longer matters in that deeply human way. Gradually, your world begins to shrink. You're not just aging, you're becoming emotionally smaller. I've seen this many times. A man I worked with named Walter hadn't been touched by anyone, not even himself, for almost 6 years. After his wife passed away, he told himself that part of his life was over, that it wasn't appropriate to seek pleasure, that maybe it wasn't even healthy. But over time, his mood darkened, he stopped sleeping well, and he became easily irritated. Only when we really talked, when we sat down for an honest conversation, did he start to understand the role that sexual contact played in his emotional well-being. I remember the moment he looked at me and said, "I didn't know I was still allowed to be a man." That phrase has stayed with me ever since. The truth is, many older men have internalized the belief that sex, especially solo sex, is for the young, that after a certain age it's childish, dirty, or unnecessary. But that belief is deeply damaging because the need for contact, for release, for intimacy doesn't disappear with age. It simply changes. And if we honor those changes, if we approach them with curiosity and care, we don't lose ourselves. In fact, we reconnect with ourselves in a way that is often deeper and more meaningful than ever. So why don't more doctors tell you this? Because many feel uncomfortable, because they weren't trained to discuss aging and sexuality with dignity, because they fear opening a door they don't know how to walk through, and because they mistakenly assume you don't want to talk about it either. But I promise you, you're not alone. Thousands of older men are asking the same questions, feeling the same uncertainty, carrying the same fears. And I'm here to tell you, it's not too late. You can still feel. You can still desire. You can still touch your body with kindness and care. Masturbation is not a failure of connection. It can be a way of connection, a bridge between your physical body and your emotional needs, a way to tell yourself, I am still important. So if you carry silent doubts, if you wonder whether your habits are strange, risky, or embarrassing, I want you to let them go. What you do in your private space with awareness and respect for yourself is not only healthy, it is deeply healing. And in a world that all too often overlooks older men, this can be one of the most important forms of self-respect you have left, because at the end of the day, masturbation isn't the problem. Silence is. Once you break that silence, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself that were never truly lost. They were just waiting to be remembered. You've come this far. You've explored the 5 secrets. But there's one more thing I want to leave you with. Something that ties it all together in a simple and powerful truth. Stay with me for the conclusion. This could forever change how you see aging and yourself. Conclusion. 5 secrets about masturbation that older men wish they had known earlier. If you've made it this far, I want to say something from the heart. Thank you. Thank you for staying open, for remaining curious, for being willing to face something that most men your age were never taught to talk about. That alone puts you in a rare and courageous group of men. Men who don't give up, who don't back down, who won't let silence define how they live the final chapters of their lives. We began this journey by challenging a belief many older men carry, without even realizing it, that their sexuality fades, that their desire should disappear, that masturbation somehow isn't appropriate after 60 or 70 years old. But what we've discovered together is far more honest and powerful. First, we learned that erections may change, but pleasure doesn't have to vanish. Your body isn't failing, it's evolving. Then, we explored the emotional layers beneath the surface of self-touch, anxiety, loneliness, the search for comfort. Most men never realize that what they do isn't just physical, it's deeply emotional and neurological. Afterwards, we uncover the truth about disuse. When you stop using your sexual function, your body gradually forgets how to respond. It's not just age. Inactivity causes the most harm. When we address the dangers of excessive pornography use, we reveal how overstimulation can rewire the brain and disconnect you from natural, meaningful arousal, something many men experience but rarely understand. And finally, we discuss something doctors rarely mention, that masturbation in later life can be a lifesaver, not just for your body, but for your confidence, identity, and well-being. These 5 secrets aren't just advice, they're invitations. Invitations to reconnect with your body kindly, to stop judging your changes, to stop waiting for permission to feel again. You don't need to be in a relationship. You don't need to perform like you did at 25. You just need to be willing to listen to yourself, to the messages your body is still sending, to those quiet moments of vitality still yours to experience. I'm not telling you this today just as a doctor. I'm telling you as a man who has walked alongside hundreds of others like you. Men who feared they were broken, only to discover they were simply misinformed. Men who thought it was already too late, only to realize the truth came just in time. You're not too old. Your time hasn't run out. You're not finished. You still have access to connection, pleasure, and healing if you're willing to reach for them. So regardless of your age, regardless of your past, I hope you finish this message with one clear idea. Your body may age, but your right to feel, to touch, to be whole, that never expires.